So I was holding my tongue in discussing this topic. The reason is because I got busy. Not as many people were talking about it. But now it's kind of made a re-entry on Twitter. I have a very low tolerance threshold for excuses due to injury. Okay? 2018, right? Carson Wentz had a back injury to end the season. He happened to have that back injury during the time that they played against the Cowboys, the first time and the second time. But here's what I'm going to say. The Cowboys won that game and they deserved to win those games. They won. It doesn't matter that Carson Wentz had those injuries. He still went out there and he played. They decided, hey, we're going to put Carson Wentz out there despite being injured. We don't care. And we deserve to lose those games. Sure, there's maybe some controversy enshrouding the second game, but they were close games. They were one-possession games. Sure, we didn't have our good cornerbacks in that game, and we got scorched, but you have 53 players on a roster. You have depth players. If you don't have the right players out there to win you games, that's your fault. It's not the fault of the other team that just kicked the crap out of you. Don't give me that. And Eagles fans are guilty of that. They're very guilty of that. And they shouldn't be saying that because that's just an excuse. That's an excuse to take away accountability for losing a football game. Week 8. The Eagles played the Cowboys. 3-game losing streak against Dallas. I'll give you week 17 of 2017. Don't care. Coach comes out, guarantees a victory. Players are having turmoil. The locker room's having turmoil. The media, turmoil with the team. And we lost. We got the crap beaten out of us. The game wasn't even close. Dallas was mentally and physically prepared. The Eagles were not. Doug Peterson, who's a Super Bowl champion head coach, did not have the Eagles prepared for the game. The backup tight end fumbles. We lose the game. Tavon Austin scores a touchdown on the very next play. We lose. Zeke scorched us. Dak played aight, but the Cowboys won. Cowboys were the better team. The better team won. In my personal opinion, pound for pound, in week 16, both teams were coming in 7-7. But the Eagles should have had no shot in that game. No shot. Outside of the fact that, the quarterbacks are pretty even and the offensive line is pretty even, defensive line pretty even. The Cowboys have the Eagles at almost every other position. Running back, wide receiver, linebackers, definitely linebackers. We should have no chance winning that game. And we probably would have lost that game if Doug Peterson was much worse than what he was. He was horrible in that game. That was one of the worst coach games he had all season. Jim Schwartz, that was his best game. If we didn't have Jim Schwartz being as good as he was in that game, we would have lost. We would have lost. Big time, we would have lost. The week before, Dak Prescott, he injured his throwing shoulder in the game against the Rams where Clay Matthews tackled him. He sprained his AC joint. That's a 1 to 6 week recovery time. And of course, they shot him up during the Eagles game, but he was out that whole week in practice. He was out. I was thinking to myself, because I was looking at Pro Football Doc, I was reading his columns. Basically, Pro Football Doc was saying, he shouldn't play. The reason why I picked the Eagles to win that game was because I thought Dak wasn't going to play. And in my opinion, if he was really that injured, he wouldn't have played. However, his injury delineation going into that game, it wasn't doubtful. It wasn't questionable. He was playing. There was no injury delineation in his name. There were other players on that team that had injury delineations next to their name, but Dak did not. He didn't. And he played like utter trash. There were a few plays he had. There were a few balls that, it was like Nelson Aguilar had dressed up like Amari Cooper and just played in his uniform all game, because Amari Cooper was playing like utter garbage, utter trash. And again, if Doug Peterson was smart about his play calls, the Eagles would have probably won by like 14 points instead of just 8. But I guess that's how it goes, right? We won that game. The Eagles won that game. And what makes me absolutely sick to my stomach is when I see tweets of people saying that the Cowboys were forced to start Dak against Philly despite having a separated shoulder and a half-broken hand, which he did not have a separated shoulder. He had a sprained AC joint. And how do you have a half-broken hand if one finger had a hairline fracture? And here's the point of this video, right? Here's the point of this video. It's not to bash Dak, because again, he had a bad game. Everyone has a bad game. And he had better games during the season against better defenses than the Eagles had. If your starter is injured, you don't play them. Now, that's the moral of the story. If you start your starter and they're injured and they play poorly, then it's your fault. That's your fault for playing him. That's his fault for even playing. It was selfish of him to play, because you're basically admitting that he costed you the game because he was injured. Unless you are Eli Manning, unless you are Peyton Manning, unless you are Brett Favre. Unless you're them, you're probably not as good injured as your healthy backup. And if you want to say, well, Cooper Rush would have done nothing against the Eagles in that game, well, you don't know that, first of all. Second of all, as somebody who has watched the starter get injured year after year after year after year, whether it's Vic, whether it's McNabb, whether it's Cobb, whether it's Foles, whether it's Bradford, we've had success with backups. Did anyone see Joe Webb against us in 2010? A guy who played wide receiver for the rest of his career? He beat us. He beat us like 24-14 as the starting quarterback. He beat us. So you never know. You never know what's going to happen. But as per seen in that game, Dak wasn't ready to play. Either he wasn't able to play or wasn't ready to play, or I don't even know what or. He shouldn't have played if he was that injured. He shouldn't have played. That was a mistake in playing him. If it's the Cowboys' fault for playing him because, we got to win that game in order to go to the playoffs, well, that's their fault for making their quarterback play. And if it's Dak standing there being like, well, I can't look like a pussy, I can't look like a weakling, and I'm going to go play, that's straight up selfish. That is straight up selfish that he costed his team that game. And you know what the funniest part of this whole thing is? If he was really that injured, then how come he threw for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Washington Redskins? Which, by the way, their defense wasn't much worse than ours. So, what I'm going to say right now is take away all the excuses. Put them all away. Because the excuses are irrelevant. The Eagles won Week 16. We won that game fair and square. We were the better team, which is really weird because we didn't have better talent. I don't care about how great your players are because I think that just proved it takes more than great players to win football games. And I know you guys just got rid of Jason Garrett, and you guys are saying that Mike McCarthy is 100 times better. Mike McCarthy is a better coach. But don't go ahead and tell me that Jason Garrett was the only reason why the Dallas Cowboys started out 3-0 and ended up 8-8, losing 8 out of 13 games. That's all I have to say. It's PR. Peace. I'm out. See ya. Have a nice day.